Did you want me to do the
What's up, everybody? This is Blake&VishSports, Sports, episode 60. It's finally made it to episode 60, even though our streaming has been very inconsistent for a little bit now. We appreciate all of you hanging in with us. It's been a rough semester in terms of both of our schedules. We're trying to get as many of these in as possible, and today was a good day to do so. A lot has happened in the NFL since the last time we streamed a little over a week ago, and we're here to talk about it. Obviously, the title of the video, we got to talk about Kyle Shanahan. And, did we anoint him too early on whether he's a good coach? But we're also going to talk about the Carolina Panthers QB situation. Blake and I were both very vocal on how we felt Sam Darnold was not a solution for anybody this offseason, and we're pretty happy to be right about that. And then we're also going to talk about Odell Beckham, that entire situation. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how good Najee Harris has played so far this year. So we got a packed show a little bit, and we'll take some questions if there's some good ones. So if you guys want to post them right now. But that was a long intro, Blake. What's up? How does it feel to how do you feel about Jordan Love's first start, your Packers, all of that, and then the Aaron Rodgers immunized versus back situation? What was your thoughts on all of it?
Oh, yeah, definitely a lot of news for the Packers. I think this has been probably one of the more eventful sort of mid-seasons for them because usually they're, more under the radar. There's not too much. It's usually steady with what's happening, and then all of a sudden the immunization thing and Jordan Love plays, and maybe not as well as pretty much everyone was hoping he would, but yeah, it's an exciting time in the NFL. We're already halfway through the season, which is kind of weird to think about already. It feels like the off season was way longer, and then the first 8 weeks just fly by, it seems. But yeah, I'm ready to get into some topics.
Yeah, the entire Jordan Love thing is funny because I was like watching half of the first start yesterday just because I didn't get to watch it because I was at the Niners game, and it's just funny to me how people pick and choose who they want to nitpick. Was he good? No. But we knew he was a developmental prospect making his first start. And I don't know. I thought people came down real hard on him. Real hard on him. I didn't think it was as bad as, some of the other first starts we've seen from some of the rookie quarterbacks from this year who were drafted much higher than Jordan Love. So I thought, again, I'm not saying I think that Jordan Love is going to be the next Rodgers or they were right to pick him because I don't think either of those things. But holy cow, people were hard on him after his first start.
That too, because obviously with Justin Fields, I felt like he got slandered really hard. Zach Wilson, similarly, Trevor Lawrence to maybe a little lesser extent. Mac Jones has been talked about in a poor sense from some of his games, but Jordan Love's felt really bad, and some of it I thought was unfair criticism. Everyone's saying the Packers have a top 5 O-line. If you watch that game, you could tell that their O-line was not playing at that top 5 level. Everyone says, oh, they have the best receiver in the league. And yeah, Devontae Adams is really good, but there was just a lot of times where, the center and the right guard just failed miserably. And you can't really do much when that's the case. And I don't know. I thought there was definitely some of the same things that people say with Justin Fields or with Wilson. Those same excuses could carry over to Love, but I didn't feel like true. But I mean, in fairness to them, Jordan Love has been sitting for over a year, so you'd kind of expect him to maybe be a little more prepared than that. But I thought as the game went on, and especially in the fourth quarter, I thought he got better as it progressed.
Well, yeah. I mean, you brought up the right guard and the center. I feel like Chris Jones on the interior will do that to any right guard and center, let alone two backup starting in place of Josh Myers. What I will say is that my biggest takeaway, honestly, was wow. Like, how could Kansas City have Chris Jones in the edge for the first 5 games of this year?
Yeah.
Like, he was good on the edge, but in the interior, him, Jeffrey Simmons, Aaron Donald are the 3 best interior defensive linemen in football by far to me. He's that good.
Yeah, he's great.
All right, so let's get into what we had planned. I mean, we talked about Jordan Love, a quarterback who's perceived to be struggling based on one start. Let's talk about a quarterback who's actually struggling. And I think this situation is interesting because it goes beyond the poor play of the quarterback because This team, the Carolina Panthers, have $18 million guaranteed based on the fact that they took the fifth-year option for Sam Darnold, guaranteed in 2022. We also know that they have a really, really talented roster filled with players that could have success if they made a move at a Watson or a Rodgers or maybe a Carr or whoever becomes available this offseason. So, Blake, I'll ask you, what do you think the Carolina Panthers should do at quarterback moving forward? We know Sam Darnold's hurt. We know PJ Walker's going to start a little bit. I think we've seen enough of Sam Darnold to say he's a bust. He's not the quarterback that people thought he was. He wasn't a product of the Jets. He also was not a good quarterback. So, what do you think should be the resolution here?
Yeah, so I don't think this is a quick fix this season. I think this season's kind of it is what it is. You have Darnold, you have PJ Walker. I kind of like the idea of seeing what you have in PJ Walker. He played a little bit last year, and I think he has a little bit this year too. And he's been, he was in the XFL, and he's been kind of exciting. He's made plays and all that. So maybe you roll the dice with him and see if he can string it along for a few games. If not, you have Darnold. But this season, the 2021 season, I don't think there's anything they can do now that just changes what they have at quarterback. Now in the offseason, they have two routes they can go. They can either draft a guy in the first or second, but I think if you're going to draft one, may as well go first and see what you can develop him into and have Darnold be the stopgap, or you can go the veteran route and maybe a guy like, I don't know, maybe they try Daniel Jones, or maybe they go with an older guy, like, I don't know, maybe Jimmy G or someone like that could be a stopgap. I think those are really the two routes. I don't know if they should go the stopgap route. They just had Teddy Bridgewater. They had a ton of guys after Cam Newton's falling out season, like Kyle Allen and such, that it just didn't work. I think they just need to draft someone and maybe have them develop for 1 year while Sam Darnold's still, $18 million on the books. Just have him be the starter, and just really just see what you can develop one of these young guys into. And there's not a lot of this quarterback class, at least for 2022, is not as hyped as it was for 2021. There is no Trevor Lawrence. There's no Fields. There is no Zach Wilson, or at least that's how it is perceived to be. But there's guys like Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, Carson Strong out of Nevada. I guess you really wouldn't even –
Matt Corral.
Yeah, Matt Corral. I was going to say Spencer Rattler, but I don't think he's going first round anymore. But Sam Howell too. There's a lot of guys that look like they might be first rounders, and I don't think they're going to have a top 5 pick. I don't know if they'll have a top 7 or 8 pick, but I think they'll definitely be within the first 14 picks. So one of those guys, whatever they like the most, I think they should take them, have Darnold start the year, or if they just want to have him even be the backup and just have him there. But I don't think you can continue to have Sam Darnold be the long-term solution to this quarterback issue.
Yeah, and I think Matt Rule has more or less said that right today. He said that everything is open at the quarterback position. And, I'm excited to see how PJ Walker plays. I thought he looked pretty good when he played last year. I thought he looked better than Teddy B did last year. He's got a stronger arm than him. I like him a lot. And this year when he played, it's been rough. But I think the big thing with Panthers quarterbacks, and I said this about Teddy Bridgewater, and I think it applied to Sam Darnold weeks 1, 2, 3, and I think it'll apply to PJ Walker. I think there's a massive difference between how they play with Christian McCaffrey on the field, especially with how Joe Brady uses him and Christian McCaffrey on the field, right? Sam Darnold looked competent, like a competent starting quarterback weeks 1 through 3. Why Christian McCaffrey played. Teddy Bridgewater to be with Christian McCaffrey would still be the Panthers quarterback, even at the price they were paying him. I think PJ Walker can be successful in his next few weeks starting, as long as Christian McCaffrey remains healthy, because I think that's how good Christian McCaffrey is. I think that's how good he fits their offense and all of that. So to me, that's one factor. And I think PJ Walker will prove himself to be a top-notch backup in the NFL. The second part of this is Sam Darnold. There's not really much they can do with him, right? I mean, you got $18 million guaranteed to tied up to him. So if I was the Panthers, I would take the dead cap, honestly. I would say screw the 3 picks. I would say do what the Rams did with Jared Goff, they have $30 million dead cap tied with Jared Goff. You have $23 million of cap space next year. I would take $18 million of dead money and just cut him. I don't know what value he brings as a backup. He's not durable. He's not a good quarterback. He doesn't play well for the pocket. He makes a couple of off schedule plays here and there, but you can't sustain yourself off of that. I mean, he's got a pretty quick release, but overall, I don't think he's that good of a quarterback. And so I would just cut him. And then you have options, right? Do you try and make the big move for Deshaun Watson? Well, I mean, you could try, right? You should try, but are you going to land Deshaun Watson? The odds of that for most teams is basically, I mean, it comes down to who he was. So that's questionable. You could go the stopgap route because, maybe the Niners cut Jimmy G or something like that, and you can side Jimmy G at a cheap price and have him. He fits the Joe Brady style offense, a lot of short passes, and we know Jimmy G is very good at throwing the ball short and intermediate over the middle of the field. So
Mm.
maybe that kind of works. But I don't think that's really a solution for them. I think you nailed the solution. And I think it should have been the solution from day one. I think they should have kept Teddy Bridgewater and picked Justin Fields or Mac Jones at 8, regardless of how good J.C. Horn looks, regardless of maybe how good Rashawn Slater would have been for them. You got to solidify the quarterback position in the NFL, especially when you have a DJ Moore on the outside and a Christian McCaffrey in your backfield, two of the better weapons in the NFL. And I think they just got to bite the bullet and take whichever quarterback they like best. And they got to now you get the rookie wage scale. So now even if you cut Sam Darnold, you're becoming cost effective over the long term. PJ
Mhm.
Walker is cheap. Maybe he's kind of your stopgap until this rookie gets ready. He's not going to be the level of prospect I don't think of Mac Jones or Justin Fields, the two guys that would have been available at 8 if Carolina had not traded for Sam Darnold. But I think that's basically really their best possible solution right now because they have a really, really good roster with guys like Brian Burns and DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey who are stars in this league. And and Derek Brown is very good. JC Horn looks really good. CJ Henderson could become terrific. They don't want to
Gilmore.
waste this window, right? I mean, maybe they re-sign Gilmore too.
Yeah.
So, and he's playing lights out again. So, they do not want to miss out on this window. They got to get the quarterback position right, and they got to get it right fast. And Sam Darnold is nowhere near part of the solution for that.
No, and I think we can even just coming back to it in the offseason, at the time the trade was made, I know we were kind of on this, but it just didn't seem like a second rounder for him was a good idea. I think I mean, personally, I would have said like a third or one third or one fourth. Like, okay, I can justify that because you're getting a guy who was once a top 5 prospect and all that. But I want to say they traded a second and a fourth for someone who hasn't really shown much signs of being good. And the main excuse being, oh, it's because of Adam Gase. And yeah, there is probably some truth to, not having good receivers, good running backs, good O line, even. But I mean, it's the difference between what Herbert did last year, and he's such an outlier, I know. But even when things weren't good, you could tell he was still a good quarterback. But with Darnold, it seemed like the Panthers were just hoping, praying that the reason Sam Darnold wasn't that good was because of how bad the Jets were, and not his own maybe lack of skills. And
And sorry.
that's a big risk right there that you're making because and they took the 5th-year option too. If they would have came out and said, we just want to evaluate how he does this year, I would have said, okay, I actually like that move. You're risking a second rounder for a quarterback who could be or was once thought of as a top 5 guy, right? But you solidified that you're paying him 18 million guaranteed without him playing a snap for your team and seeing if he is any good. That I think is where the line needs to be drawn. That it just wasn't the move to be made.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest detail. I think you nailed it. The fact that they took the 5th-year option to me is the biggest mistake in all of this. I don't think trading for Sam Darnold, in theory, no matter what you thought of him, right? You and I felt, yes, bad coaching, yes, bad scheme, yes, bad O line, yes, bad receivers. We also said yes, bad quarterback too. It was all of those things put together, right? I mean, Adam Gase honestly deserves an apology for shielding Sam Darnold from so much criticism because so many people were so obsessed with their pre-draft analysis that felt, Sam Darnold, the classic QB from USC, that was a bit overhyped coming out of college. But that's a rant for another day. If they did that and they just said, okay, we'll take a risk. It's a rental. We'll see how it goes. If it goes great, we're signing him long term. So screw the $18 million guaranteed. I would have respected that. I would have been like, yeah, that's a shrewd move. Like, okay, maybe you're not convinced that Justin Fields or Mac Jones will be available at 8, or maybe you're not convinced that Justin Fields or Mac Jones is the future quarterback. So take JC Horn, who's played really well prior to him getting injured, and ride it out and see 1 year with a guy who was talented enough to be the number 3 overall pick in the draft. Well, taking his 5th-year option is really what puts them in this situation. They don't have any answers now because they owe this guy $18 million guaranteed, and he's shown at no point in his career that to play anywhere near that value, and that's a big problem. I think both of us agree that the solution is go find somebody in the draft, but we'll have to see what Carolina eventually does, because I think that for such a young, talented, promising team with 2 pretty decent coordinators in Phil Snow and Joe Brady, and Matt Rule look promising as a head coach, this one move of picking up Sam Darnold's 5th-year option could ruin all of this. And they have so many talented players like Derek Brown, Brian Burns, Christian McCaffrey, obviously, DJ Moore. It would suck to watch it get ruined because of JC Horn. It would suck to watch this get ruined by this.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess, it's easy saying this with hindsight. And although at the time we were saying they shouldn't do this, but if you are the GM and you don't pick up his 5th-year option and you decline it, what are you saying? Are you saying you're not confident in your quarterback? I feel like if they didn't do that, it would also be sending a message saying, we don't really think Darnold is that good. Because if we think he's really, really good, we're just going to pick up his option. And I think that's maybe a bit of a reason why.
No, I totally understand the optics of that, and I think that definitely had something to do with it. You're absolutely right. I just think that you can't worry about those optics. You have to make him prove
Yeah.
it. He's proven nothing over his first 4 years in the NFL, and he's gotten more opportunities than a lot of people who've proven next to nothing as well. Like, there's a lot of other guys in Sam Darnold's situations who the situation hasn't taken the excuse for them. They've taken a lot of blame and they've been written off. I mean, Mitchell Trubisky is one guy that comes straight to mind. He never got a second chance to start somewhere. He had to go be a backup in Buffalo. So, I think that I get what you're saying, but I think from day one they should have never taken that
Yeah.
5th-year option.
Yeah. I'm with you on that, but it's still interesting that maybe that had more of a impact on the entire decision than we would know, and maybe it didn't.
And here's another name, Drew Lock, right? He didn't get that long of a leash. Heck, even Tua, right? We aren't the most pro Tua people, but the Dolphins have written off Tua way faster, and Tua,
They
to
should.
his credit, has shown a lot more than Sam Darnold showed in his time starting with the Jets.
I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, Sam Darnold's projection was based on the fact that he has a visibly high upside. Tua doesn't have a visibly high upside, but he's been a consistently better quarterback than what Sam Darnold was.
Tua has been good this year. I don't.
He's been okay, yeah.
I know he's not as good as Herbert and Burrow, but Tua, their 3 linemen are tied for first in pressures given up. They have 3 tied for number 1. I don't know what
And
you want to do with that.
they've drafted horribly around him, right? Like Austin Jackson was a bad pick. There's been a lot of other bad picks outside of Tua. He's taken the brunt of it because he's basically not as good as Justin Herbert, and that sucks. But I mean, I think the biggest thing with Tua is there's little upside to me. He could maybe be a pretty good quarterback in the NFL, but is that the value you want from the number 5 overall pick? This is an absolute conversation for another day. But my point was more to say he hasn't gotten the chances from both the media and his own organization the way Sam Darnold did.
One last thing on him too. If you watch any of those press conferences, those media reporters are ruthless. If you think Grant is bad and is pressing some buttons, you should watch the Dolphins because they nonstop just talk about Tua and Deshaun Watson. I mean, I just feel bad for him at this point because it's out of his control. Brian Flores is just getting grilled up there saying stuff about Tua and Deshaun Watson. I think the GM's days are not much longer going to be. He won't be there too much longer with this whole fiasco going on.
To the reporters there, Grant would be considered tame. They asked. He's the nicest guy, and they ask him point blank to his face, like, "How do you feel about the fact that this team does not think you're good?" They ask questions like that are basically the overlying. They don't word it that exact way, but the overlying theme of what they're hinting at, it's comes out very clear that that's what they're hinting at.
Yeah. Yep. Grant would be a tame man in Miami, which is interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Uh,
So we talked a little bit about the Panthers and their QB situation. That's a bit complex, obviously. Um, let's go straight to the main topic of the show. The show is titled, "Was Kyle Shanahan anointed as a head coach too quickly?" I'm going to go straight into it, and I'm going to give you the floor, Blake, because this is a guy you and I have been talking about since before this YouTube and all of this was a thing. We were talking about Kyle Shanahan. I loved Kyle Shanahan in 2017. I still love Kyle Shanahan, but you were not as much high on Kyle Shanahan. Sometimes it was to troll me, sometimes it was serious. So, what are your thoughts of how this 49ers season has played out? And do you think Kyle Shanahan's a good head coach?
yeah, I think this is just from being around you and a lot of Niners people. I think we just overhyped this team a lot, and we gave them expectations that maybe some were fair and some were unfair. The fact that we thought they were a bona fide playoff team, I think that was a little bit unfair. The fact that we maybe didn't take into account some of the injuries and all of that that's happened. Although we did say we were kind of right on the secondary and saying they needed to bolster it, but some of those things, like if you would have told us that Drake Kirkpatrick and Josh Norman would be the starting corners come this time, we would have probably changed our thoughts on the situation, on this team's record a lot. I think that's the fact. And you take into account the poor drafting too, thus far with how much they've played. I think we overrated this team a little bit going into the season. I think that's kind of cooked into his perception. But my thing with Kyle Shanahan that I think is the overarching issue is just too much power and over personnel and coaching. And there's very few people that can actually do both well. Even Bill Belichick, anointed, many people think the greatest NFL coach ever. He's been many Super Bowls, all that success in places besides the Patriots. He's still
He's terrible.
his drafting record is not that good. In the second round, he takes corners or defensive backs that are projected to be 6-rounders and are not good. His receivers that he's drafted aren't good. I mean, they acquire tight ends and receivers other ways, but his drafting is still not good. And so that's the best of the best. And Shanahan is just not at that level even. So I guess the long point I'm making here is one person should only be allowed so much power in the organization. I think that's where the issues stem from. I still think Kyle Shanahan's a good play caller. I mean, we've seen he gets into like rhythms, like the Colts game, that first drive where they were just killing them with counter runs, and they were just making Darius Leonard look not intelligent. Like he didn't know what he was doing, and then for whatever reason they went away from that. And I just think at the end of the day, he should just focus on the coaching aspect and not personnel decisions. And I think that's the final. I think that's the final solution to how they kind of figure this out. Is he going to be a good head coach? Well, if you just only have him focus on head coaching, only coaching, have someone else do the personnel stuff, he can have input here and there like any coach should. But if he just remains as the coach, I think he will be a good head coach. I do. And if he leaves the 49ers and say goes to the Falcons or goes to some other team that hires him with less power and he kind of has, only one main thing to focus on, I think he will be a good head coach. I mean, we've seen his play calling been effective wherever he goes to. So I don't think that's the issue. Is he a good head coach? I would say at this point, we can't say if he's a good head coach or not because he just hasn't been in a position where he's only coaching is kind of my main takeaway. So I don't know if he's a good coach or not. I know he's not the best with personnel decisions in my mind and drafting and trading picks to get his guy. But I think as a coach and as a play caller, he is good. So that's kind of, I know I was pretty long-winded, but that's my overall thoughts is give him only head coaching duties, and I think he will be successful. Give him too much on his plate, and no, he's not going to be as effective as he could be.
I think you nailed it. I have the same exact feelings. I think he's a terrible personnel guy. I mean, I think some of the decisions the 49ers have made in terms of value, in terms of misevaluation and all that, like everybody misses on draft picks, right? Like even the best GMs, Ron Wolf even used to miss on draft picks and players. What you can't miss on is trading 2 picks to go get Dante Pettis because you think Dante Pettis in the second round is going to be, the greatest receiver, or not the greatest receiver ever, but you think he's so good that you have to trade up 15 picks to go get him. Like those type of decisions to me are the ones that are a little bit bizarre. The Joe Williams pick. I mean, I don't want to rehash it. I rehash it with Grant every Monday. I don't want to rehash it here, but the point is the personnel things with Kyle Shanahan are bizarre and they're not great. Um, in regards to is he a good coach? I think he is a good coach. Like I think he's a great offensive coach. I still think he has a really good scheme. I still think he's a good play caller. I think all of those things still apply. I agree. I understand where you're coming from in terms of we can't evaluate him yet because it feels like he has too much on his plate, and it looks like Kyle Shanahan, the personnel guy, has really failed Kyle Shanahan, the coach. But I also don't know if we can call him a good coach at this point. I mean,
Mhm.
Bill Parcells coined the phrase "You are what your record says." And technically, he's not what his record says because there's nuance and there's details that we have to cover and context in terms of their record, right? 2017 roster, like they were rebuilding. That roster was terrible. 2018, Garoppolo went down. Then 2019, they went to the Super Bowl. 2020, it was all hurt. And now 2021, they're not playing good football. But I also don't think you can call him a good head coach at this point because there's issues I have, I think, in terms of game management and situational management that I think fall on him as a head coach. And I think those type of decisions cause him to lose more games. I think his X's and O's acumen and his scheme genius makes him compete with a lot of teams, even if his team is inferior in terms of talent or whatever. Though I think this team does have talent. I think they're just underperforming across the board, and that starts with him. Um, though you and I were actually overrating them when we said they were the seventh or sixth seed in the playoffs. Just wanted to
That sounds
include
good.
that because I know a lot of people here were quite upset when we said they were. You said seventh, I said sixth, so we had them kind of in the same tier, going either 9-8 or 10-7. That was kind of where we had them. But again, not to go on that tangent. What I wanted to say was, he makes too many errors to me in terms of game management and situational management, and they're not a good situational football team, and that starts with him. And so I think because of that, it's really difficult to call him a good head coach at this point. I think he's a really good offensive coach. I think with a strong GM and given that he can, learn from his mistakes in San Francisco, I 100% believe he would be successful in his second stop. Sadly, I'm not saying he should be fired this year or anything, but I just don't see him reaching the pinnacle of his career with the 49ers. I just feel like for whatever reason that's coming in his second stop, and it hurts me to say that because I'm a Niners fan, but I'm sick to my stomach just with the way my brain is thinking about these things. But yeah, overall, I'm 100% with you. Good offensive play caller, terrible personnel guy.
And then one more thing too, and this isn't to be like saying he's bad, but maybe he's just not fit to be a head coach. And this has happened with many other guys. Vic Fangio comes to mind. Everywhere he's been in DC, yes, they've had some talented teams on the Niners and the Bears. Like those defenses had a lot of talent, but he was a great DC. Wade Phillips, similarly, not the best head coach, great DC. And maybe he is kind of that mold where if you just have him focus strictly on play calling, he will be incredible. He will be an absolute genius. But when you give him the head coaching duties and you have to, give him personnel stuff too, maybe that's where it just flips and he's just not able to handle all those things. And that's not a dig on him in any sense. It's not easy being an NFL head coach, a successful one at that. That's really hard to do. Um, so maybe that is the solution for him is just being one of those guys that's an OC and mainly just focuses on the play calling and just dialing up his run packages that are very, very successful.
Yeah, so I understand where you're coming from, and I think it is a fair thought. I'm not ready to go there because I think he deserves one more head coaching shot. If he
Mhm.
flops in his next head coaching stop too, I think that's more or less what his perception would be, and I think it would be correct. But I do think no matter what happens over the next 2, 3 years with the 49ers, even if it all ends miserably, I think he deserves one more shot given that he's still 42 years old and we know what kind of potential he has, especially given how good he is as a game plan designer and a play caller. But I mean, there's just things to me before he becomes a good head coach that need to improve. And they're not just personnel decisions, it's just situational decisions. It's really situational stuff that bothers me in terms of game management. And then the other thing is sometimes I feel like he can be a little bit tone deaf and a lot of I don't like talking about the personal side of things just because you don't know how one person feels about a decision. You can only speculate and it's really tough to speculate. But a lot of people have been talking about, how tone deaf it is to basically tear down Jimmy Garoppolo or be not he didn't personally do it, but he allowed it because of who he flirted with. Basically have Jimmy Garoppolo be torn down by the media for 2 straight years, flirt with every quarterback, and then expect him to come in and help you win games this year and all of that and not move on from it. It's just everything just feels like sometimes a little bit bizarre. That's really the word I can use. Or, the Ayuk situation being discussed in the media, I thought was a little bit extra. I don't think the media needed to know that he wasn't working hard enough with the GPS. It wasn't just him, it was John Lynch too. But those things just don't need to be out in the media, in my personal opinion. It's unfair to Brandon Ayuk for people like you and I to be questioning his work ethic and his profession. I certainly wouldn't like that, even if there was a GPS tracking my screen time. So I just think stuff like that can be a little bit maybe, missing on the personal aspect of it. Maybe we're nitpicking, maybe we're speculating too far. I don't know. But at this point, I don't think we can definitively call him a good head coach. We know he's a good offensive play caller. We know he's a great offensive game designer. We know he's a bad personnel guy. I think more or less I land where you are at, where it's difficult to call him bad either, just because we would like to see him just as the head coach without having personnel power. But I don't think we can call him good either.
Definitely. And I mean, with the GPS thing, just even off that too, you mentioned the tone deaf press, like just the press conferences after the Packers game. Matt LaFleur came out and said, I need to do a better job of setting my guys up for success. How many times have we heard Shanahan say something like that? It is not very frequent. All about execution. And yeah, like maybe it is about execution, but constantly throwing other people under the bus is maybe not the best way to go about things, and shouldering some of the blame yourself. And it's not easy to do. And I'm not saying that, like I would be someone who's like, oh yeah, I'm not doing good enough. I'm failing these guys. It's hard to do that. But when you see some of the other successful guys doing that successfully and, saying, oh, I got to do better this, I got to do better that, and always trying to improve and maybe shouldering some of the blame yourself. And that's something I know a lot of people have been a little frustrated with.
Yeah. And to be fair to him, right, we don't know if he takes accountability. Maybe he comes out in the building and he just takes full accountability. He just doesn't do it with the media.
Yeah.
We don't know that. But the point is, I just feel like it looks a lot better if he's less testy in the post game and he just is quite simple. He doesn't try too hard to answer these questions or give an honest question. He just says the way Belichick said or the way LaFleur said. Jordan Love had a lot of issues in that game. But the first thing LaFleur said is, I got to do a better job prepping us for that zero blitz. And if he just says that, look, he doesn't even have to believe it. I just feel like it goes a long way in terms of taking pressure off of us now analyzing his post-game pressers because he looks like a guy without answers or he looks like a guy without a great pulse on his team. Like those type things shouldn't happen. And I feel like he gives us an opportunity to do that because he just doesn't come out and say, you know what? We didn't play well. It starts with me. I didn't coach well enough. I didn't prep us well enough. But we're going to do better next game, and I'm going to coach better next game. And it's just say something simply like that. It's a little cliche, but it gets the job done.
I think it's better than saying something that's not cliche, especially for the media that tries to take every tidbit. I mean, even we're talking about it now. Just don't give anyone people or things to talk about. I mean, even if it's true, I think cliche answers work really well in those interviews, and even post-game interviews with players, it's always cliche stuff. And you wonder why. You just don't want to give the media something to run away with. But that might be a little too much, but I think there's some truth in that.
I agree. And so let's move on to our next topic, right? We talked about Kyle Shanahan. Now let's talk about a receiver that he's been pretty public in terms of being effusive with his praise for this guy. A lot of people say he loves him. He's not going to get him this offseason, but he was recently cut, and that's Odell Beckham Jr. And Blake, we know that your Packers are reportedly his number one destination. I saw that the Saints are the most likely team to get him. Then I saw that today that the Patriots are making a big push. So let's take all the variables into this, right? Which team fits, how Odell Beckham's playing, what team's the best fit for Odell Beckham, what team Odell fits best for Odell Beckham, and what team Odell Beckham fits best. Where do you think he should go?
I think the number one answer is the team with the new quarterback, Mac Jones and the Patriots. I think it makes too much sense. It just does make too much sense. Here's why. this offseason they signed a couple tight ends, they signed some receivers, and we thought their offense would be new and improved, right? And
Hmm.
well, the tight ends haven't really been as good as their contracts say. Hunter Henry's been scoring touchdowns, but I don't think the yardage is there. And what they thought they could get out of them isn't as what they thought they should. Nelson Aguilar is looking like a slight overpay at this point. They don't have just a dominant offensive player. They run the ball pretty well. They have a lot of good running backs, Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, but they just don't have that guy that can just win them a game on offense. It's very methodical, moving the ball, no deep threat. And I think Odell fits that profile perfectly. He's a true alpha number one receiver. He works best when he's just getting a ton of value. And I think he could with this Patriots offense. I really do. He's great at slants, great at going deep, really would be good in the play action game too. So I don't see the issue with bringing him in. Maybe the personality clash with Belichick and Odell. I feel like the Patriots are kind of more stoic. They don't really show that much emotion, or at least that's how it seemed over the past like 20 years. So Odell would kind of be a little different from that, but they've made it work in the past. They had Gronk, they had Randy Moss. Both those guys have big personalities, and they somehow made it work. I think they could do it with Odell. I think the Patriots really are the best spot, and we've talked about this too with the Patriots. Is they don't have that guy that can go down the field, and everyone's like, "Oh, why is Mac Jones throwing so many checkdowns, this and that?" And we've always said, "Well, who are they going to throw it deep to? Nelson Aguilar? I don't know if he's the best deep threat for them, but I think Odell's a pretty good deep threat, and I think he would be a great solution for the Patriots offense in a team that has bounced back recently. I think they're 5-4 right now, or in that 500 area, so they're teetering towards
Three
the
in a row.
playoffs, kind of where we thought they would be. But I really do think Odell would be such a good fit for this team, with lacking that true number one receiver.
Yeah, and they're really 3 games away from being 8-1 because really the Dallas game, they lost more than Dallas beat them. The Bucks game, they basically lost that game, in my opinion. I thought they really were the better team throughout that game. And then the Miami game, Damian Harris, if he doesn't fumble the ball at the 5-yard line, New England kicks an easy go-ahead game-winning field goal and wins that game. So really, New England's competed in every game. They've been a good football team all year. And I'm 1000% with you. So I think in theory, right, I like the fit of Green Bay, right? It's a similar offense to what he came from with the Browns. He could be the number two receiver to Devontae Adams. I think he fits a real need, and Aaron Rodgers is the perfect quarterback who has full autonomy of the drop back pass game. And, he can alert if he sees the right matchup and get the ball to Odell Beckham. So I think in all of that, if you theorize it from that standpoint, um, Green Bay does make sense, but I actually think New England's the better fit. I think he fits New England's offense really well. You brought up they've managed big personalities. I'm glad you brought up Gronk because that is a big personality they manage. Of course, Randy Moss. There's a few others over the years. They've always taken risks with guys that have had been perceived to have, locker room issues or whatever those are. But I think he fits from the standpoint of he's really good short and intermediate still. Maybe he's lost a little bit of explosion because of the injuries, but I still think he can get down the field, and he can definitely get down the field better than both Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar. I think he fits with exactly what they're looking for. I think the one thing is, he may not get as many targets because they will be a run heavy offense, but I think when they're looking to throw the ball in gotta have it situations, he automatically becomes their go to guy because that's what I think they're missing right now. You talked about it, right? They're a methodical offense. They have a phenomenal run game. Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris are unbelievable, and they run block really well. They're just missing something in the pass game that can make things easy for Mac Jones, where Mac Jones doesn't have to be right, making every correct decision on every 10-yard pass every single game. Where you can throw, Odell Beckham a 6-yard slant and he can take one for 15, 20 yards and run after the catch. And I think that's where it fits perfectly. I think he would be perfect for Mac Jones from that standpoint. But I don't think they'll end up getting him. I do think he'll end up signing with a Green Bay type team. I don't think he wants to take the risk with the young quarterback the way he did with Baker Mayfield. He's 29, his career's teetering. He's got to show something before he ultimately will enter free agency again this offseason. So while I do think, in my opinion, in your opinion, New England's where he should go, I think he'll end up probably with your Packers. And if he ends up with your Packers, I will be cheering for it. I'm still a big Odell Beckham fan. I don't want to cheer for the team that you're cheering for, but I'll probably end up cheering for them to win the Super Bowl if Odell Beckham goes there.
Yeah, and I said the Patriots, but I think the Packers, you could put them 1A, 1B because with the Packers, it also just makes so much sense. They're missing a true dominant number two. If you remember, even the past decade, they've always had at least like 2 to 3 great receivers. Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings, James Jones was pretty good for them. Jermichael Finley, Donald Driver a long, long time ago. And they've always been better when they've had two really good guys. And right now, they only really have one. Robert Tunyon's on IR, and even then, I wouldn't qualify him as a great number two. MVS is a pretty good deep burner, but outside of that, he's limited. Lazard's a good run blocking receiver, but he's not someone you're counting on time and time again. And Randall Cobb's just up there in age. Your second best receiver is probably Aaron Jones at this point. And I don't think they utilize him in the passing game as much as they potentially could because he is a really good receiver and he's shown that. But he is a running back and he is in a timeshare with A.J. Dillon, who they both are getting a lot of touches. So I really think the Packers would also make a ton of sense. And him on slants from Rodgers that just sounds dangerous. I cannot even imagine what that would be, having both Devontae and Odell.
Yeah, I'm 1000% with you, right? Like, I think in theory, New England's kind of the perfect spot because I think New England needs him more than any of these other teams. And I think New England, he kind of needs New England because New England would give him structure. But I also think New England would ensure that, like there's going to be games if he goes to Green Bay and if he's not playing well, they're just going to leave him out of the game plan because they can go to Devontae Adams. New England, basically what they're missing is Odell Beckham Jr. They need that style of guy to be that guy. So there's not going to be a game unless he really, there's these locker room issues with him or whatever are really a big deal because I still don't know what they are because they've all been refuted by teammates. So I don't know what the actual issue is. So let's say those things are a real thing, then maybe he gets cut from there. But otherwise, they would be the team that would, try and force feed him because they're missing a true go-to receiver. Kendrick Bourne's a really solid number 2 or number 3 receiver. He's consistent. He gets open, but he's not a guy where 3rd and 8 with the game on the line. Where is New England going to go with the football? It's not Jonnu Smith. It's not Hunter Henry. It's not Aguilar for sure. It's not Board. That guy would be Odell Beckham, and they're going to play in big games down the stretch because they're vying for that playoff spot. So to me, and Mac Jones has shown that he's very accurate and he's very good from the pocket, and he can make really good decisions from the pocket, really impressive decisions, honestly. So I think from all those reasons, I'm with you that New England should be the place he goes, but I do think it ends up being Green Bay, just as you do. And for the same reasons, I do think it's still a good fit with Green Bay, but I think New England makes the most sense for both parties.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think this is a two-headed race between these two. Personally, I just don't see Vegas. Like, I get it. They need a deep ball guy because Ruggs is gone. They signed Deshaun Jackson. I don't get it. They have so many. I don't want to say they're great options, but they have solid pass catchers beside, like, you have Renfro, you have Waller, maybe Bryan Edwards turns out to be something good. They have Josh Jacobs.
To me,
I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. He's not the type of guy they need.
I'm 100% with you. And I don't, given all the noise around Vegas, right, with the Arnett situation that was weird, the Ruggs situation was obviously awful. Like, you feel for that family that lost somebody, and you feel bad for Henry Ruggs too. Like, he made one terrible, terrible mistake, and now his entire life is gone. But I just think that bringing Odell Beckham in with all of that, I don't think that's what they're trying to do right now. Like they're trying to basically clean up after going through the Gruden situation, the Ruggs situation, now the Arnett situation. I don't think Mike Mayock's the type of guy that wants to bring Odell Beckham into that. To me, that makes no sense.
Last time they tried to get a really good receiver like this, they got Antonio Brown,
AB, right?
who
Yeah.
he had an interesting offseason, although we must say I think as NFL fans, we owe an apology to him because we deemed him as insane, and he was actually right about a lot of the things that were wrong.
He was right about Big Ben, that's for sure.
He was right about Big Ben. He was somewhat right about. I don't think he was a fan of Gruden or Mayock. I don't know, but he's been right.
Called Mayock a pretty derogatory term. Yeah. And then the other thing is funnily enough, when they asked Bruce Arians about Odell if they would put a waiver claim, I thought what he said was clever because it had two meanings. He said, "I have too many letters. I already have AB. I don't want to add OBJ." But I think the way he said it right was like, well, we just don't. I don't want to call people by like the letter nicknames, but he kind of nailed it. Where we already have one guy that we gotta, satisfy in AB. We don't want to add one more big ego
I
in there.
I wouldn't be surprised if they got Odell just because that receiving core would be the best ever, easily.
Oh, with
You
Odell,
think of
Antonio Brown,
Odell, Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin.
Godwin,
I think
and then
Odell
you throw in people like, yo, like let's be honest, Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson are number 3 receivers at a lot of places. Heck, Scotty Miller and Tyler
I
Johnson, if
don't
you
know.
put them on the 49ers today, they are the 3rd best receiver, either of them. They're both better than Mo Sanu, they're both better than Juwan Jennings. And for the Packers, they
I
would be
would
up there.
maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But and then the other
I,
option too is the Saints. I just don't understand this from OBJ side. Why would he want to go to the Saints? Maybe he's a
Travis
fan.
Simeon.
Yeah. Does he want to catch passes from Taysom Hill? I don't imagine. And then the Saints side of things, do they want to have him and Michael Thomas on the same team at the same time? That just
They're
sounds like,
competing for the number 13.
yeah, I don't know. That would be a I would not like to be another receiver in that locker room with them, but I don't know. LA Rams, maybe this would be
I
interesting. Although
I thought he would want to go to the Rams, honestly, just because of LA and whatever. And I was pretty nervous about that as a Niners fan. But him, Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods would be fun to watch with Van Jefferson. But there's been no buzz about the Rams and him. Maybe this is a classic Rams where there's no buzz. There's buzz on the last day, and the Rams get the deal done as usual. But I don't feel that this is one that the Rams are going to get him. I think the Rams are pretty convinced and have great conviction in what they have right now.
and then someone too's asking about Baltimore. I don't see Baltimore. I don't see why he would want to go to Baltimore. Run heavy team. They just drafted their hopeful number 1 and Rashad Bateman, and we slandered Hollywood Brown a lot, but he's actually been really good for the last season and a half. He has been really good. And I think as him as your number 2 or 3, you also have Mark Andrews. I think those 3 right there is probably good enough on a team that's run oriented heavily. So yeah.
This one actually makes sense to me. I just haven't seen any buzz about it. But I think him with Herbert, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen would be filthy. I just haven't seen any buzz about it. And OBJ doesn't strike me. He already spent time with the Browns. Why would he want to go to an even smaller market with the Chargers?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a move he would like, but that would be a really good fit too. But
Yeah, I mean, we don't know Odell. We just are speculating. But yeah.
mhm.
All right, so just a couple more topics, guys. We did add one that I didn't mention in the pre-show or at the beginning of the show, and so let's talk about it right now, right? Um, there's been a lot of talk, right? Blake and Vish Sports has probably done like 4 different videos this NFL season on who the best team in the AFC is. I'm not sure this team is the best team in the AFC, and they will be the best team in the AFC all the way through the rest of the season. But right now, they do deserve credit because of who they've beaten and how they've beaten them. And I think the reason they deserve extra credit is because they have a unit on this team that is playing at a level that I don't think anybody expected coming into the season. The Titans defense was terrible last season, and they were terrible despite having some good players. They add Bud Dupree to this defense, and they're schematically so sound this year. There's a lot of guys showing out, and I just wanted to give them credit. Like the Tennessee defense is unbelievably good. So, what do you think about the Titans? How good are they? What do you think of their defense?
Yeah, so I think they have 3 really, really good guys that have been kind of holding it down. One guy who's I know one of your favorite, Jeffrey Simmons, interior D line's been really, really good. The first episode I think we ever did on our channel, you said he was the most underrated player in football, and that was a year and a half, probably like a year ago. So I still think he's probably being pretty heavily underrated. Harold Landry has been really good as an edge. This is something that they've been really missing over the last few years. If you remember last year, their biggest guy was Clowney, and Clowney just did not work out for the Titans. We can just put it that way. Did not work out. They also have Bud Dupree, so I don't know if he's been exactly worth the big contract, but as a number 2 guy, I think he's a perfect number 2 guy as your second best pass rusher. And then the safety, Kevin Byard. I feel like he's another one of those guys, small market safeties that's kind of disrespected, or just maybe not disrespected, but not talked about as good. For how good he is, he's not discussed enough. I think you could probably say that
Top
about
five.
some of the other safeties from small towns or smaller teams, like the Jesse Bates, like the Justin Simmons. Those guys who are really, really good, not getting talked about enough. I'd say Byard's kind of in that same mold of people and how good he's been. So I think those guys have really been the ones holding it down. And this is really impressive what they've done without Derrick Henry so far. I'm surprised. I mean, everyone was saying he should be in the MVP conversation, but if you can do what they've done without him, and I know it's not like their offense has been fantastic without him, but doing what they did against the Rams, I think you have to put some stock in that and really show how good the defense has been.
Yeah, I think you nailed the everything. Like the first things first, right, is they have three elite players. The first two I think have been elite for a little while. Kevin Byard has been a really good safety for a long time, and to me, he's one of the 5 or 6 best safeties in the NFL. Jeffrey Simmons, I mentioned him when we were talking about Chris Jones at the beginning. He is one of the 3 best interior defensive linemen in the NFL, in my opinion. It's him, Chris Jones, and Aaron Donald. I think those are the 3 best. We saw what he did on Sunday Night Football. The guy is incredible. And then finally, it's Harold Landry, who, he had a lot of potential before his draft. He showed his potential at the beginning of his career, and then it was like, is he just going to be an average player? This year, he's been lights out. He's been like one of the 5 best edge rushers in the NFL. If you just look at sole production based on this year, Harold Landry has been as good as anybody. He's an unbelievable player. And then they have a lot of players who are like really underrated who fit well around him. Like Rashaan Evans is good. David Long is good. And, even though they've had all their corners hurt, right? Christian Fulton got hurt. Caleb Farley played like 3 snaps and got hurt. They've been able to make do because their front 4 basically wrecks games, and they rush 4 and they drop 7 into coverage and they play zone. They're really sound. Vrabel's a really good coach. He's a good coach defensively and he's a good coach situationally. And they're really smart with how they play, and they're well prepared for a lot of game plans. And because of all of that, we're seeing that this is the first time under Vrabel they have a real defense where even if Derrick Henry gets hurt, this team is still going to be, especially given how the AFC has been, everybody's not played good. They're going to be as good as anybody to make the Super Bowl even without Derrick Henry, because Tannehill is still a good quarterback. He's still very accurate and he's still good off play action. They still run block really well. None of the running backs they have can take advantage of runs like Foreman and Peterson the way Henry could, but they can still run the ball. AJ Brown, Julio Jones is still tough for anybody to handle. They're both really, really good still. And then this defense is real. It'll be tough for any offense to move the ball against this defense because they can get pressure with their front 4 between Dupree, Landry, Jeffrey Simmons, and then they can drop 8 into coverage and they play really clean and sound. So I think that this Tennessee team right now is the best team in the AFC. I don't know if it'll last that way. I'm happy that I was one of the people who said that they would win this division for sure. It would not be Indianapolis. I'm feeling pretty good about that at this moment. We did do a couple topics about that, so not to rub it into you, but to rub it into you. But I do think that their defense is really what's their driving force this season, not their offense.
Definitely. And that was kind of something coming into the season that had told us that the Tennessee defense has been keeping this team afloat and has been really good. That would have probably been a major surprise. Their defense was not that great last year, even though their offense was a top 3 scoring offense in the league, and their offense maybe hasn't been as good as it was last year, but I mean, they still have most of those pieces, and Derrick Henry looks like he will be able to come back for that playoff run. So we'll see if he can come back and be as good as and be as dominant as he was earlier. I know foot injury, it's like his outside of, I think it's pinky toe, something in his foot, which is, I mean, I don't know the extent of it, but it just seems really bad for a running back, especially someone as big as he is, cutting as hard as he is. So we'll see if he can come back and be as good. But until now, we just get to watch Adrian Peterson and Dante Foreman and Jeremy McNichols kind of see what they can do taking over all those snaps. But I'm excited to see what this offense can start producing without Henry. And A.J. Brown being healthy is really, really underrated storyline for them because beginning of the season, he was not the A.J. Brown of the past 2 years. And now he's starting to ramp things up back again. So we'll see how they do.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you, but I did want to, no matter what, give them a shout out because they've been very good, and I don't think they've been getting enough credit nationally. I feel like it always happens with Tennessee, right? Tannehill never gets enough credit. Outside of Derrick Henry, honestly, none of their players get enough credit. So I wanted to make sure we covered that, and that brings us to our final topic of the day, and it goes to a player you are very passionate about. You're very impressed with how he's played this season. So without further ado, I'm just going to give you the floor because I know he's on track for one of the better running back rookie seasons we've seen in a little bit, especially when you include his receiving. I know the Monday Night Football crew did a great job of talking about him that entire game, but you've been talking about him for the last, like, I want to say 5, 6 weeks. We got to talk about Najee. So we're finally talking about Najee. I'll give you the floor. How good has Najee Harris been?
I think I think it's safe to put him as a borderline top 10 running back. I think he is that good, and I think he will only get better. Now it's kind of weird because he's a little older of a player. I want to say he's 22 or 23, and he's older than some guys that were drafted last year and the year before just because of that. So it's kind of weird. He's older than Jonathan Taylor. He's older than DeAndre Swift. It's weird thinking that because they've already been in the league for a year, but it's true. Um, all right, reasons why I think he's top 10. He forces it. It seems like he forces a missed tackle every single play. This Steelers offensive line is about one of the bottom units. It just is. They weren't that good last year, and they didn't really do anything to improve it this year, besides signing some free agents that were considered outcasts like Trey Turner and just starting them. And we heavily criticized this pick, saying they should have gone offensive line, but he has just been so good. It almost doesn't matter. Not only is he breaking a ton of tackles, he's also just a 3-down back. You don't really have to take him off unless he gets tired because in the receiving game, he's been really, really solid, and that's been really helpful for Ben because they throw the ball short all the time, all the time. And he got targeted 19 times in one of their early games. I forget which week, but 19 targets for a running back is unheard of, let alone a rookie. So that's impressive. And I don't know, man. I think he's the perfect build of just being absolutely jacked and being so, so fast and being so athletic. I mean, you saw in college the hurdles. He can still do that now on NFL guys if need be. And he'll go through people too. So I don't know, but I really think Najee could enter that top 5 territory in his prime in like a couple of years. So I really think he's been one of the lone bright spots for the Steelers team that with their quarterback play declining is going to be maybe rough in a couple years.
Right, yeah, the Steelers, I mean, you say one of the lone bright spots, but the Steelers are somehow 5-3, and they're 5-3 despite the fact that I don't care what anybody says, Steelers fans, you can yell at me, but they're one of the worst rosters in the NFL. It's just that Mike Tomlin is just so good, and their defense is really good still, and they just find ways to win games. I mean, Big Ben feels like watching Eli at the end of his career. It's shocking how bad it's gotten with Big Ben. But Deontay Johnson's good, Claypool's really good, and Najee's obviously good. And so I think what's huh?
Baby Gronk, Pat
Oh,
Freiermuth.
Freiermuth? Yeah, he's been impressive. He's been impressive for sure. But what I did want to mention with Najee is his rookie season actually reminds me a lot of Saquon's, and it's not in the sense that they're similar players because they're really not. It just reminds me of Saquon in the sense that the offensive line, like Steelers' offensive line, has not been as terrible as I thought it would be. I thought it would be just terrible. It's just bad. It's not terrible, but
Yeah.
um, but he's able to, and a lot of Saquon's rookie, you're right. We would see him make a few guys miss, and it would be some of the most impressive like 4-yard gains we've ever seen. That's what I feel like we're seeing with Najee Harris. We're seeing a lot of impressive plays that the stats just don't tell the whole story because he's not well supported right at this moment. He might be, but quarterback play or offensive line play. I mean, quarterback play, shocking you would say that about Big Ben, but quarterback play, offensive line play is not aided to his success. Rather, in my opinion, it's hindered it a bit. So I think he's like Saquon with less hype, though, because I think Saquon got too much hype as a rookie. It was a little nauseating at times. I think Najeeating, if you will. I think Najee Harris should be hyped up more. I think he's really good, and I don't think that putting him borderline top 10 is a hot take at all. I think he's right there in the conversation. I think he's in the same tier as a lot of guys like David Montgomery and Jonathan Taylor, those type of guys who are on the edge of that conversation. I think Najee, you can put him right there with him, especially given how good of a receiver he's shown to be too.
Yeah, that's kind of been the part for me that, he was hyped up to be like this 3-down back. He wasn't considered as good of a receiving option as ETN, who a lot of people kind of flip-flopped on which one was better. I think most had Najee, and Najee was taken before ETN, but his receiving has been amazing. It's like his usage could be similar to Saquon, or not Saquon, similar to CMC in the fact that he's out there 80% of the time because you just want him out there as much as possible because he's that good of a playmaker. Now, obviously, there's a reason he's only probably shouldn't be out there that much, and because running backs, just the shelf life, they don't last that long, and you see every single running back that signs a big deal ends up always with a big injury, it seems. And the person who everyone knows is built different, who's the anomaly to that, Derrick Henry, he got injured too. CMC, Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson. I mean, any running back that gets paid, it just seems like they get injured at some point.
Yeah, even Nick Chubb.
Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, even though he's not paid like that, he's still a good guy. He's
there's only one that hasn't yet, knock on wood for him.
Who?
Kamara.
Kamara just got injured.
He's
injured right now.
Oh yeah.
It's not long-term, luckily.
Right.
It is not long.
But I mean, you picked up a little niggle. It's not the same. I actually totally slipped my mind that he was injured. I was going to bring him up, feeling all good that he played 15 games last year and he's played for the majority of this year. But you're right.
I think the difference though with like Aaron Jones and Kamara is they don't get as many touches. They get a lot of receiving, which ups their touches, but they're not going between the tackles like a Derrick Henry, like a CMC. Which is kind of interesting, and I think that's kind of how they maybe last longer or aren't injured.
Yeah, they don't get as many carries. They get total touches that account for the same one. You're right. And then LA Rams brought up Zeke, which is true. I mean, Zeke kind of fell off. Then he kind of came back in the middle of this year, like where you look like Zeke, and now he's kind of treading water back where he's still really good, but I don't know how good he is at this point. I'm just going to wait till the end of the year before I give any thoughts on Zeke. But you're right. Zeke didn't actually get injured.
He didn't actually get injured, but I feel like it's almost as if he did, comparing his rookie year to what he's been since he got the contract. Because rookie year Zeke he looked like
back in the NFL.
He looked like a top 3 running back perennially, and now he doesn't really get much more. He lost a lot of explosiveness, I guess, is the main point that he's.
Yeah, he looked like an Adrian Peterson type player as a rookie. But yeah, that's what makes what Adrian Peterson did all the more insane. I mean, that guy was truly unbelievable.
He got an ACL injury and he came back and just, casually looked like he was even better.
2K?
So. Yep.
Okay. All right. So guys, we've reached the end. We will be back actually this Friday. It's been a while since we've done 2 streams in a week, but we will be streaming this Friday. I'll tweet out the time later so you can follow me at Twitter at Vish Kumaran. And we'll be streaming Friday, and Friday we'll do some rookie running back rankings. So there'll be some more Najee talk, and we will also take some questions. So if you have any questions that you wanted to ask today, bring those Friday and we'll definitely answer them. We appreciate all of you supporting us. It's been a little while since we've streamed. We hope to get a little more on track and consistent with it. Thank you so much for joining us. Please like, subscribe, and share. Please like for sure. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you on Friday.